everyone's viewing the market from the get-go from these fingerprint lenses, right, where they can't see much. If they stick at the same system religiously over a course of time, those fingerprints are going to dissimulate, they're going to go, and they can see the market clearly. The problem with the industry now is that they're switching glasses every 6 to 12 months, so they're not seeing what they're supposed to be seeing clearly.
That's such a great point, because we're going to have hundreds of six-figure traders. We already have six-figure traders.
Yeah.
And some, of course, there's people in the shadows that are at that point. But I know there's going to be people that literally start off the year breaking through to 100, and the year on, let's say, 700.
Yeah.
Even if you're not at seven figures, you're still saving.
Phenomenal.
Your life has changed. You take care of your family, you do what you want. You can live a phenomenal lifestyle. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Inside the Mind podcast. Joined with me today, a very, very special episode. First time ever, which we're all in the same room. Our two coaches, Ibrahim Ansari and Abdu. I won't say his second name, just in case I don't pronounce it. How are you guys?
Honestly, doing fantastic.
Yeah, very well. Yeah. Voice is gone from yesterday, but we're trying hard.
So a bit of context, we had the end of year event yesterday, so our voice is a little bit tired. You understand why, but we've really wanted to take this opportunity just to explain lots of things about the industry. I think you're going to really enjoy all the topics that we talk about, take value from it. Wherever you are in this space, whatever strategy you're trading, you need to pay attention to these details. What I'm going to do is start off with really your guys' story. Abdu, Ibi, you've been on podcasts before. They've seen you. You've been to events. Abdu, this is your first time at an actual year event. How was last night anyway?
It was incredible. Honestly, speaking to everyone, it was funny because I think people didn't realize that I met even yourselves yesterday for the first time. And they're like, how's it been? Whatever. I was like, how are you finding meeting people? And I was like, no, I'm meeting everyone today for the first time, but it's incredibly surreal, and the energy and the atmosphere and seeing it. I was saying this to people. I was like, I'm so lucky that this was my first event, because I understand in 2019, the other one looked incredible and everything, but people weren't yet trading funded capital. People weren't yet scaling up. So it was a concept in that way. Whereas I was speaking to tons of people, they're like, what you taught me here led me to get this funded account and get this payout. And I'm just like, what? It, but until you actually see it and you'd see pictures of the way they've upgraded their homes, helped out their families and, their mothers and fathers and stuff, it was just incredibly humbling. I haven't even processed it yet, if I'm being honest. I think on the ride home, I'm gonna on the plane. Sorry, the plane. Yeah, seriously. But on the plane home tomorrow, I'll just be like, what just happened?
Yeah. It's going to be incredible. For those that don't know your story, might be listening to you for the first time. If you used to just give us a couple of minutes as to how long you've been trading. They know you're a coach, but what's been your journey like so far up until this point?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, I found out. I bought my TradingView annual the other day because it was Black Friday. You just get it, right? And I just see it was 7 years now, and it caught me off guard. I was like, whoa, 7 years of that. And I actually had e-signal before it, so I guess it's 8 years or whatever. I wouldn't really count that year, but so it's about 7 to 8 years now. I do come from a gaming background, and I've had that logistical side of things of just both playing on the esports side of things as well as other games such as RuneScape. People know it, but more particularly because on it there was a way to end up creating money in the game, with running these probabilistic systems. So to me, it was something I started at such a young age, completely coincidental, being honest, just playing the game because it's just what you did as an only child. And then you would do that and realize, wait, you can make money online. And then funny enough, it wasn't really entrepreneurship that I was like, oh, I gotta do this and create a company. I just wanted to stay home and continue playing games, And then we found a way to make incomes through probabilities it was different games throughout the game. So you'd have you could plant a seed in the game and it would grow a flower, and that flower would come out one of 7 different colors. And then off that, we were able to create different games that had different odds. And I was so young at the time that at first you would play it and you'd realize, wait, you have, for example, one of our main games at the time had a 72% chance of winning, and then when you would win a lot of the time at 72%, but then sometimes you would lose quite a bit, and it was baffling. You're like, why am I losing so much? You just woke up to lose that day, and you would spend the whole day, you would start your day, right? You go into I guess in trading terms, you go into extreme drawdown, and you would spend the whole day trying to get back to break even. And at the end of the day, you're celebrating. You're like, oh, I got back to break even, great day, and you're genuinely happy that you got out of it. Now, in the moment, I didn't think much of it, but years later, I realized I had cycled through every probability sequence you can think of. I had the days where you just win nonstop.
Yeah.
I think my biggest win streak at the time on something like that, I think it was 46. And it was so fascinating because you would observe how other people would react to you winning. you know. So you would tell like to get more people to bet or whatever, you'd be like, hey, I've won 12 times in a row, you know, and they'd be like, well, he's won 12 times in a row. He can't win again for 13 and then 14 and then it will go, right? And in that moment, that's why I actually understood the macro and the micro of things. Because why were we saying that? We're saying, hey, I've won 12 times in a row. So from a law of large numbers perspective, yes, I'm going to probably lose again. But my last 12 rolls have nothing to do with my 13th. You know, the odds are not going to change. And that's the same thing. So actually, when I understood that, and like before I even came into trading, I actually knew these things, not consciously. When I came to trading, I wasn't offended by trade 1 to trade 2. You know, I was like, if I lost something, I wasn't like, oh shit, I just lost 3 in a row. Okay, the market owes me 1, it's going to give it back. I didn't think like that.
So that is what it is. You understood that very quickly.
Like right away. So funny enough, like when people talk about like the psychology of trading, it's not that I didn't need it. It's I had years of it prior. So when I came in, I was like, hey, I just need to understand the technical analysis. And I was like, once I can get that down, I know probability sequence, I know law of large numbers, I know how to not correlate those things because I've spent years, even with like the money side of things, I had seen the fluctuations. I'd already had the being reckless with money and doing the things. And I got really lucky that a lot of people around me made money quicker and then they spent it incorrectly. You know, they went down, unfortunately, like a drugs path or something of the sorts that really ended up causing them to lose all the money and everything. So it was one of those things that I got to learn so many lessons. And I was able, like, if you want to look at it from like an ASR point of view, I didn't have to like make those mistakes myself. I just had the proof around me. I was like, dude, you messed up your life doing that. I'm not going to do it, you know? Yeah. So I didn't fall to the shitty side of things and the allure in that way, you know, and just understanding the numbers. I was like, okay, as long as I could get my technicals right, because the difference is the other one's purely mechanical. You know, you roll a dice, you can't mess that up, right? It's like, especially online, it's not, there's no hand trick or whatever. But in TA, I was like, I got to know that my TA is good to justify the loss. So I actually knew that right away because I was like, okay, you take the loss, especially in your first year, maybe first, second year. And I was like, oh yeah, great trade. You know, I was like, how do I know it's a great trade? But I was like, once I knew I would pass that and get to the point where I've proven through like statistical data, understanding the strategy and all that, I was like, it's just a numbers game at that point, you know? So then going into any drawdown, which I don't know, like 2%, 3%, whatever at the time, you don't care. You're just like, you don't take offended. So I guess that's the very like speed run on the probability side of things.
Well, it's definitely helped you to get to where you are today, to have that understanding.
I'm so grateful for it. Honestly, it's one of the things where I've always wondered, I was like, man, if I never played those, like just that, what would have happened? You know, and funny enough, we were talking about this and like, I did have a phase on League of Legends, you know, and it was hilarious because I was just addicted to the game. Like there was nothing more to it, right? The community was so toxic that the second you made a mistake, the enemy team would make fun of you and your 4 teammates would make fun of you, right? Like people just want, like on the spot, they're like, dude, you're the worst human, like uninstall the game, and they would say a lot worse things, right? And everyone was like that. Even if the mistake you made was not your fault, they would just effectively tell you like to end your life. They're like, just get out of here. You know, you're an ape, you're whatever, right? So what would actually happen, funny enough, you would see people, and then you would see this on the Reddit side of things, because the sub I think has like 3 million people or whatever. People would quit. Right? But the other people that kind of made it to the top, what happened to them? They got extremely tough skin because they realized either that you can spend time in the chat fighting with everyone to justify why you're not shit while the game's happening, by the way, right? It's not like it's paused and you can just talk and converse and people, you're expecting them to be logical with you, be like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry, dude. I they're like, dude, no, fuck you. Like they'll literally like they don't care, right? Yeah. And you realized you had to get better. That was the only way. You know, and funny enough, I was with some friends at the time. Like we also used to play, so we had a TeamSpeak at the time, which is like kind of like a Skype for those who don't know it, but like for groups or like a Discord, an early Discord, right? And it was funny because we'd all look up each other's rankings. So you knew if you lost, people were going to make fun of you. Your own friends were going to make fun of you. And then if you avoided playing, they would notice it. They're like, oh, you haven't played in 5 days. Scared of losing, huh? So you had to get better. There was or quit, right? And then if you quit, they'll also make fun of you. So it's like it put you in the situation of like, for your own ego, you have to win. And funny enough, it built such a tough skin that when I came into trading in the rough, I was like, dude, like, no, they're gonna make fun. I was like, you gotta do this, you know? And funny enough, like, not a lot of people agree with this, but I held them accountable. I told them, I was like, hey, one day I'm actually gonna really kill it in trading. And the big part of it is because I just don't want to come back to them one day and say, oh, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Funny enough, like that to me was
almost wanted to burn that bridge.
Yeah,
just be like,
but that's it. I was like, it has to work out. And I was like, it could take long. It could be brutal. It could cause a lot of suffering or whatever you want to call it. But I was like, not quick. I was like, I will come back and be like, I told you so, dude.
But you're a coach now. So you've done it.
It works out.
Nice.
Ibu, what about yourself? I know people have heard your story so far, but if you just give just a really quick run through.
Yes, so the trading 6 years. Started late 2016. Actually, December 2016. It's been 6 years this month. Not like I count, but I started off when my cousin introduced it to me. So he was he worked in senior trade support for a broker firm. which became liquidated like 2 months after. And funnily enough, now he filled all the orders for Saxo Bank traders. So he's
really?
so he's really well connected. He works with like high clients and stuff. And we caught up recently. It was nice. But he got me into it first and foremost, late 2016. He told me he was a trader at the time, but he wasn't. And it just sparked a thought in me. And I was like, 7 days, 8 days straight after that, I was looking into what trading was. I wasn't good at maths. I failed it at college. So I thought it was all a numbers game. I was watching all these videos on YouTube, read a book and everything on it, Forex trading for beginners. I'd made my mind up on it. And 8 days later, I put some money into an account and I blew it within 2 days. But I just got hooked, right? I was like, this is a cheat code, if you like. And from a young age, because I already had an entrepreneurial mindset, I was like, this is my gateway to that, to make that a reality. And then I was just joining college at that point. So I didn't pay any attention in college whatsoever. All through my free periods, this is for a full year at my first college. It was trading consistently. And my maths teacher, funnily enough, he was like a genius at maths, this guy, right? Like abnormally good. He caught me reading this book between my lessons, and I just failed an exam prior to it. And I remember because I'd left it at my desk and I went to the bathroom and I came back and it's gone. And the next day in lesson, he raised the book up like that in class and said that we have a culprit here. And he mocked me in front of everybody. And he was like, I know what this game's like or whatever. And it's just, you're going to go down a dangerous road anyway. So I had this experience of mockery throughout college. And my second college that I went to, because I failed the first one, it was the same sort of thing. My accounting teacher, she completely bullied me. I never spoke up to my teachers just out of respect. And slowly through this, I'd made my mind up that I'm going to leave college now. And it was February 2018, I made the decision to just cut ties. I left college. I was in the careers advisory section with these 3 or 4 different people, and they were 65 years old, giving up on their life, trying to teach me or tell me that this is what you should do with your life, etc., right? Which is the irony in it. So I'd left. I was on my own. And prior to that 2 years, I was already self-taught trading from 2016 onwards, half of which I don't even remember. And then I used to go to a lot of networking events as well, as soon as I left college, like property meetings and stuff like that, just because I knew that I had to get around people who had money, just to get to an idea of how they thought. And I realized through that, I was like, the world is a much different place to what I thought it was in this isolated bubble of school. And I knew from an early age, school is not a measure of intelligence. So all this is now coming together. And then 2 months later, I come across Falcon on Instagram. As a trader at the time, I saw his charts. They were just something completely different to what I'd seen. I'd seen support and resistance indicators, all sorts of stuff, different things that I'd never seen before. And for the first time, I saw clean charts. And I was like, this is sick. But then I saw the price tag of £57 a month at the time. I was like, this probably is a scam because it's too cheap. Because there's courses going around for £3,000-4,000 for 2 days. So that was my paradigm. I thought, let me just try it for a month. So I did. And I was hooked. And then 6-8 months, my first 6 to 8 months, I had to clean cars to actually provide for this membership.
I remember, yeah.
Right. But it was sick because I valued it more, right? I left college with no job and nothing, no money like that. Badminton tournaments made me a little bit, but again, all that money I'd put into a trading account prior and blew it all. But that gave me a lot of optimism, weirdly enough, whereas most people get pessimistic about it. So then I just spent the next 6 months just diving in, and I had this goal in my mind, as you know. First 6 months, I was like, I need to get an investor by the end of 2018. And the worst thing that happened to me is that I actually got in touch with an investor. And then 2019, investment started and I blew it, right? We'd set a drawdown limit of 10%, 9 trades back to back gone. And then that shattered my confidence completely. And then after that one, I mean, that's a conversation for the rest of the podcast, right? What happened after that?
For sure. Well, it just goes to show you, both your journeys are different, but it all comes from actual struggle and building a thick skin, as what you was talking about earlier. It's most of the industry, they just don't want to build a thick skin and don't realize how much it actually takes. And it usually comes from the questions that you hear repeated. They want motivation. They want, how do I build motivation? How do I find my why? How do I find my purpose? And it's all linked around the same thing. I think it just reminds me of, if you look at the landscape of what the industry is, how would you say that's evolved over the last couple of years? Because the shift that I've seen in probably, I'd say, a couple of years, it's changing drastically from before it was, yes, people wanted returns. Now it's like a whole level of aggression of wanting things that don't actually logically make sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you want to go first, me?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, I mean, you spend a lot of time on IG, on Twitter, whatever, you look at things, and a lot of times I feel like just people forgot like very absolute basics. Like, funny enough, and this is not a shot at SMC or ICT or any of that, but there was a big period of time where these extreme high returns were being not just advertised, but claimed by a lot of people, and I was like, And I remember we were talking about it at the start. It was like, what is this? You know, like when it kind of started to get big famous, I was like, I don't know, it won't last. I was like, it is what it is, right? I was like, no, no one's going to believe this. And I was like, why was I thinking that? I was like, because I pulled out a calculator at the time, and I think they were claiming like, I think it was like 40 or 50% monthly returns.
Minimum.
Literally, right? And it's like, and then you would have people say like, oh, 1 to 100 RR and this and whatever. And I was like, and I remember questioning myself. I was like, what does 1 to 100 RR mean? I was like, they don't mean 100% in one trade, like with a 1% risk. And you know what I mean? Like, I was like, that means you're going to double your account from London session to Asian session, right? And then I asked them, and they're like, yeah. I was like, yeah, what? You know, and I was genuinely confused. I was like, you don't double money twice a day or whatever, you know, because I pulled out my calculator and I was like, all right. So I was like, you start out 10K or whatever, you make, I don't know, 40% a month. You got to be humble, right? So bring down the returns, 40% a month. End of the year, you're worth like 550K or something like that, right? And I was like, huh. Yeah. All right, this is great. You know,
do that on 100.
Right. And that's like what, just 10 times, that's 5.5 million. And it's like, why would anyone need to do this? Yeah. And you look at like the proprietary firms, like look at FTMO, right? They're a legitimate company, they pay out. They want to advertise their biggest payouts. And at the time, I think a couple months ago, their biggest payout today, I believe, is 500K. So it's like, you run the numbers and you're like, still, the biggest one to date is 500K. Like, if they had a 10 million payout, why would they not advertise it? Yeah. That would scream their legitimacy. And for the longest time prior to the 500K, their biggest payout was 100K, right? So the 100...
Something doesn't add up.
So what I found really fascinating, right, is because you would see this thing, and it was the way it was advertised, this almost like predictive strike rate in terms of like, it's so high, it's very right, smart money in itself, so there's a bit of irony in it. Right, it has to come out in that way. Yet you would if you looked at their equity graphs on the FTMO, because you can see it, they would take, I don't know, 140 trades, and this wasn't just like one person. I saw it so commonly.
In what times, man?
In the 30 days, right?
Jesus.
So you're taking 100, and remember, the goal for FTMO to pass is 10%. Now, once upon a time, that seemed like a hard thing to do, but I was like, for these people, I was like, dude, you should be able to, like, if your trade's a 1 to 100 RR, close it literally 10% of the way in, you have your funded account, and then just infinitely print money at that point. You know, so I was like, this doesn't add up, you know, and that was the part where it was like stupidly obvious to me in that way. Where I was like, okay, could this theory work? For sure. I'm not denying that some people have really killed it, but you'll probably still make in the same nominal returns of like, I don't want to say 10 to 20 or whatever, but there is a certain standard that repeats itself at some point, you know, and it's usually the people that are extremely skilled that do hit double digit returns. Yes, you can have your 30% month and 40% month. It is possible. I do know that. But the way it was being preached and shown, you know, it was like everyone's making 40, 50%. And then it's like, if you were making 10 and under, it's like you were pathetic.
It's like, how long can your luck really last?
But that's it though, right? And I was like, seriously, like to me, the biggest answer and what showed it was the sample size. I was like, if you're claiming such high returns on every trade, like it genuinely felt that like 1 to 5%. And it's funny because like prior to Falcon, I used to trade a support resistance EMA based strategy. You would target like a 3 to 1, a 2 to 1, right? And I was like, man, like we must be the boomers at this point, you know? I was like, it's just, you know, you look down upon. And it's the same thing if you notice it now as well with like the FTMO videos, because they do these podcasts with like the people that have had like big payouts. The people getting like a 25K payout, right? Don't get as many views anymore. Yeah, if like balance of probability, most people in the comments or that would watch it have not had a 25K payout. Yet all of a sudden they're looking at it like, oh, that's a shit payout now. You know, like if it's not 100, it's not worth my time. And it's like, are you at that point in your journey to look? So it was very fascinating to look at it. And I think the sad part is sometimes is you realize, and maybe I get it from a more human psychology, is like you really want to believe something. So you can forget the absolute basics, because it's like, dude, with numbers like that, even if again, 30, 40% a month and you're claiming way higher, honestly, you're a billionaire, you know, like in a couple of years.
The delusional thing is you can actually prove it to yourself in the short run. For example, if we took a very small account, right, let's say we took a 10, 20K account, just go high risk. In certain scenarios, I mean, I could just go a very, very tight stop loss on trades that we take. Yeah. And in one sequence, it just dropped, like dollar yen, for example. Yeah. Let's say I took it right at the top, and I went in with the tightest, went even on, I believe like a 20 pip stop, it run for about 17%. Yeah. So imagine I went like 7 or 5 or something like that. If I'd done that on, let's say, 10K, or even let's go even smaller, the average person that starts off trading with personal capital, doesn't have access to funding, might have like $1,000 or something like that. If they do it on that and they actually prove it to be true and make like 40, 50% and put that to their account, in their minds, they've made 50%, which is true. But doing that on more money is not the same thing. I know it might seem like the same thing, but this is what a lot of the education industry put forward when I started trading. they would say, listen, if you can do this on this amount,
You can do it
it
on
means
that.
you can do it on 10 million.
Which is funny.
Sounds logical,
Yeah.
but it's not the
Dude,
case.
it's like when you look at a pullback, and I was like, I'm sorry, dude. Like some of the times when people's like, I'm gonna hold a 45% pullback. Like I would see it in one of those ones, like with the 100R, and it was to
course.
crack me up, right? It would be like, it would start, it would drop. I was like, okay, fine, it dropped for you, fair enough. I'm willing to believe it right now, and it does like, so it's a 1 to 100, right? It does like a 65% pullback, and they're like, yeah, I'm just following the plan, and I was like, dude, okay, maybe at the start, right? But at some point, you've been making 1 to 100s. At some point, you're running, I don't know, 300K profit, and you're like, yeah, I'll let it pull back to 100 before it goes. And I was like, no, like
Yeah.
maybe if you're worth so much money, right?
and that's
like, you gotta-
reflected in the payouts as well.
yeah, exactly.
But you can tell people aren't trading much money when they say that. You said that a long time ago. You can gauge how much someone's trading by the way that they talk about trading.
100%.
You know, and it's like when people disregard emotion, it's like me saying, like you said about if I can do it on small money, I can do it on big money. It's like if you take deadlift, for example, right, as an exercise. If you just deadlift the bar, you can have perfect form, right? But if you've not trained yourself to deadlift, let's say 200 kg, your form is going to suffer, even if you know how to deadlift,
Exactly.
because your body's not trained up to it. So it's like if you're trading small capital, anybody can think, oh, logically, I just follow a black and white plan, which isn't always the answer. Then they get to larger capital because they don't exercise this muscle to actually be able to facilitate that. They're screwed.
And even people claiming to be 100% mechanical use discretion.
No, that's impossible. It's actually impossible. And I can challenge anybody to that because the guys that I've coached, I've given them a plan that is like black and white, crystal clear. And I ran an experiment with them for my own sake as well. 10 trades, every single one of these guys took at the time, there's 5 of them, over 4 weeks. And they went on a losing streak and they followed the plan 100% of the time. And so I was like, that's proof that you can follow it and still lose. It's how you follow it, right? Discrepancy, discretion is a term that's it's underanalyzed. People don't actually understand what it means. It's completely misinterpreted. Like if I've got 3 instruments on watch, for example, I'm going to have to make a decision between all 3. Either I split my risk 3 ways, right? And then I run the risk of either losing all 3 trades, which again would only cut my max risk exposure. Or I think, right, which one of these is high risk or low risk? There has to be a systemic decision-making process and also discrepancy. And that's based on what? Experience, which people don't have. I mentioned this on a podcast the other day, that if I give you, say, a pair of lens, right? Like glasses, and they're red, and I have a blue pair of glasses. Let's say that when I give you them, that they've got fingerprints all over them, as an example, and mine are fingerprints. Imagine hypothetically over time, the longer that you wear these glasses, the fingerprints get less and less over time, right? And eventually, if you wear them long enough, you're going to have a clear lens that you can see through. The market's the same way. Everyone's viewing the market from the get-go from these fingerprint lenses, right? Where they can't see much. If they stick at the same system religiously over a course of time, those fingerprints are going to dissimulate. They're going to go and they can see the market clearly. The problem with the industry now is that they're switching glasses every 6 to 12 months. So they're not seeing what they're supposed to be seeing clearly. How I trade this system now, 5 years in, as for yourself, and even yourself, the guy who made this system is so much different to 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It's weird how you can trade the same criteria and see the market and intricacies differently, and how much of a beautiful thing the right experience is.
You just reminded me of something very, very important, which was what one of the biggest excuses that I would get from students that were committed for a period of time and then justify leaving. So I want something that would be a bit more advanced. I don't want something as basic or beginner. And then when you look at their skill set, they're not advanced at the basics. How are you then going to go and find something more complex if you can't do something that in your eyes is simple? Because trading is actually easy once you have everything else figured out. Trading's not difficult, right? Once you actually figure out the process. But as you said, if you've got a blurry lens and you never have time to see clearly, you're always going to think there's problems. So you're just going to think, right, I'm going to put on a new pair, a new pair, a new pair. And eventually, 5 years in, you're still back testing.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious.
Which all of them are now, ironically. Every single one of them. Like we had the experienced students, and this is what I wanted the director Abdu as well. Because you weren't part of the experienced students at the time. You were watching from the outside in.
Yeah.
And how was that? Because you see people dropping like flies. 1 minute you're giving them an award, and 2 days later they've just disappeared out of nowhere. Like I can't fathom that. I literally can't see how people can look you in the eye and say I'm committed, and then 2 days later they're gone. You know, so how was that looking outside in for you? Because it's just it's something I can't comprehend.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I'll tell you, I looked at it a couple of ways, and funny enough, I'll thank RuneScape again for this one, right? So coming into Falcon or any trading community in general, you have your scam alert on. You're like, nope, this place is not legit. Let's see how whatever, right? So you come in, and there has to be a way for you to see it, right? And honestly, to me, the biggest way to just see it is, does the technical analysis that they're teaching actually work, right? So you kind of do have to give yourself a bit of time because, you could watch a video and he can probably convince you. But at some point, right, so you would make the Sunday market breakdown, and then week after another, it's like first month, you know, you join, and I was like, all right, you know, that seems legit, makes sense. And I remember at the time, actually, funny enough, because I was already trading support resistance with the EMA, and I was doing pretty well. And I remember, I think I caught a dollar CAD trade, and then you caught the dollar CAD trade, but you got like 3 times my return. And I was like, how? Right? And it's because my stop was like behind the fib, behind the EMA, behind the pivot, behind whatever. So I had a bigger stop that just wasn't needed. I just didn't know that at the time, right? Whereas you were able to like stop crop it with like, I don't know, maybe the continuation. I can't remember the trade now. It's like years later.
Yeah, you might have had it above a pivot, and I just had it above the top of the
But
structure.
that's
for
it,
example.
and that's all you needed, right?
Yeah.
And then so it tripled the risk to reward in that way. And I remember it wasn't just that one trade; it was like 3 times over. I was like, wait, we're seeing the same trades, right? Like I knew ahead of time. I was like, I'm gonna take pound dollar today or euro dollar or whatever, and then you were taking the same trades, but you got literally more risk to reward every single time. And I was like, okay, no, how is he doing that, right? So I was like, so at that point I joined, right? You start doing all the things, and then once I got, I'm gonna like call it a basic level understanding of the strategy. What I did was I was like, okay, if I understand this, I should be able to make my watch list before the Sunday market breakdown comes out. And then I would do it. And then I realized I was like, I didn't get it perfect, but I was like, wait, we're looking at the same things. I was like, all right, cool. So that in itself, and then what I then did, and this was actually a very big thing for myself, is I looked at historical data, right? I didn't like do it like for like, but you go back to like the early 2000s, 1990s, and I was like, it worked. And that to me was one of the most like fulfilling feelings in that point of view because of the sustainability of it. And funny enough, the reason for that is when we had our business on RuneScape and those things, we were a business within a business. So as much as we had infrastructure, we had like workers, we had everything you can think of, when the owners of the game decided for us to not exist anymore, that's it, we were done. We were like overnight banned from the game, and it was over. You know, and I didn't like the idea of built because we were 4 years in at that point. It's like imagine doing something for 4 years, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, your main income is now gone, right? And this is all going to tie in a second. I'm just kind of bringing it back together. So you learn all these things about, right? You realize you don't want to lose the thing you got so good at. You want sustainability. So when I realized the strategy's been working since, so like as much as the data showed it, I was like, what would cause it to not work anymore? Like objectively speaking, funny enough, I'm like, COVID was like the true testament of it too. I was like, okay, maybe now human psychology is really gonna change. Right now that like when the pandemic first hit, I was like, this is the one that's gonna break everything, right? No, didn't do anything. And that to me, I was like, wow, if COVID and everything that happened with it couldn't change human psychology, I was like, balance of probability, nothing will. So when I was able to prove that to myself, that's when I knew I could be all in on the strategy, right? So now fast forward to what you're saying about here, you have a bunch of these experienced students, that was the label they had at the time. They all leave at the same time. And I was like, that's interesting. I was like, why would a bunch of people just leave? Remember, I'm on the outside. I don't know you. I don't know you. I was pretty much in the shadows, so to speak, at that point. I didn't really talk to anyone. I was like, okay, everyone just left right now. Why? Right? And then you kind of hear these answers, and none of them made sense. And these are people that deemed to be successful. That's what they were like claiming at the time. I had no reason to doubt them because I was like, all right, cool, fair enough, right? And I was like, okay, interesting. I remember this one particular person too. This person at the time was like the prodigal son in Falcon, honestly, right? Claims to be making 20% a month or whatever. And I was like, good, cool. You know, every day you open up IG, he's running another trade, he's killing it, whatever. Seriously, every day I was like, and it's giving me FOMO, honestly. I was like, how am I missing
Give me fun.
every trade, right? I was like, every time I was like, dude, I leave the trade, he come back, he's in pound dollar, he's in this, he's in that, right? And then I remember, so we were in this Telegram that someone had started, right? It was like an accountability group. There was like 50 something people. And then he comes in, and remember, I don't know you at this time. And he just basically says that you kicked him out of Falcon, right? And he gave some weird story for it.
Which is not the case, by the way.
But whatever,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm willing to believe it at this point in time. I'm on the outside. I know no one. I was like, all right, yeah, fair enough. Mark's an asshole. He kicked him out of Falcon, right? But then he's like, I'm changing strategies. And I'm like, but you're making 20% though. Like, no offense, Mark. If you kick me from Falcon right now, you can't stop my trading. Like, I'm not going to just be like, oh, yeah, the thing that's making me 20% a month now, I'm so offended because Mark kicked me. I'm going to stop trading this way. And you know what I mean? Like, I was like, that was so illogical to me. And I remember, funny enough, I didn't know he was actually in the group, by the way, which is hilarious. So I wrote this up in the group, right? And I was like, I was like, guys, do you not see how illogical this is? That like whatever. And I just see him and he's like, he starts typing, and I was like, oh shit, you know, like I didn't even mean to like come off like controversial in that way. But then he ended up not responding and he left the group. You just see like exited. I was like, and that proved it to me right there.
Yeah.
And when you look at the entire experience too, so I was like, what could possibly have happened for 10, I don't remember how many there was, like 10, 12 or whatever, 18 people, right? I don't know if they all left at the same time, but it was like 13 or 14 of them to leave in one shot. I was like, no situation would 14 successful people just decide to drop years of hard work all at the same time. And I was like, what could Mark have possibly done? I was like, and funny enough, like it wasn't even cancel culture back then, but I was like, even if he said something racist, even if he said something, even if he was like, you're all shitty humans, I was like, the only thing that was left was the strategy didn't work. That was the only logical thing left. But I was like, I'd already proved it to myself, so it didn't matter. Like, that was the part I knew it. I was like, no, I see it ahead of time, right? It was like, once upon a time, you could look at a video and I was like, I remember this. I started serious. I was like, damn, Mark must script these videos or whatever, right? Because that's what you want to, you're skeptical. You want to not believe the obvious stuff. You're just good at what you do. Until I realized, I was like, okay, when I got decent enough, especially like 6 months in or whatever, I was like, okay, Mark should say this, this, and this. And I missed one because I wasn't at the level that I was yet. But I got like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
It's like, how would I know that? Like, how would I know your scripted scam video and I know what you're about to say and then it plays out? I was like, wow, this is a great scam. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm going to go with it. I was like, So to me, at the point, it's like when you realize, and it was kind of funny, like in a way where kind of with, again, kind of like these trendy things, there was a degree of my psychology to it. I was like, and I kind of noticed, and it's not a shot at people, but sometimes people are a bit over glorify trading about like, it kind of turns like anti 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And in that way, it does come off a bit culty, so to speak, and it's like you try so hard to be anti-mainstream that you kind of become the same thing you despised, in that point of view. And it's like, I was like, man, how does that happen? So that to me was when it went down. I was like, no, I don't think this is legit. Like, don't get me wrong, I was genuinely willing to leave too. I was like, yeah, let's leave Falcon. They're horrible, right? Yeah. But I was like, I need a reason though. Like, I just worked 6 months, like I have no association. And I was like, yeah, I'm down, whatever. Like, we'll do it. But it's like, I wasn't just gonna wake up and just stop remember, like I genuinely committed. Like I did 16 hours for the first 3 months a day. Like it was a really aggressive summer. It was like hoodie on, laptop, and that's it. Not sustainable, and I wouldn't particularly recommend it, but that's what I did. Right. And I was like, am I just gonna be like, oh yeah, that's done, right? I was like, no, I was like, give me a solid reason, I will leave right now. And then I reached out to someone, they all gave like really weird answers. So it was just like,
I experienced that. It was pure cognitive dissonance at its finest. Literally every single one of them I spoke to, because I was in the group, and at that point I wasn't profitable. I'd lost a lot of money. I had to give it all away. I wasn't trading any account at this point. I just got made an experienced student, and I'm looking at it thinking, what the hell? Same thing though. I don't know if it's just a human problem or what, but you just got to use common sense sometimes, which people don't have for some weird reason, especially in this industry. And I was like, all right, the system works. So then I reached out to some people that I was a bit closer to at the time that I could speak to on a level, and they go, yeah, the system does work, but I don't know, there's something fishy about Mark. So I'm like, all right, so how can a painter teach someone to paint if you can't paint himself? Use your head. No response. Literally, all my messages got left unseen by 3 different people. And I'm like, you've literally convinced yourself of something that's not even true, because misery loves company.
Of course.
And we live in such a soft world today, man. It's just ridiculous. It's beyond me. People will give up their values. People give up their future, their morals, just to flock on with somebody else. Birds of a feather flock together, don't they? Right.
No one wants to take ownership.
No, they don't.
You know what the hilarious thing was? And this was one of the big things. Like, there was clearly something I was missing because I was confused. I put a lot of time into these people as well. Like, they were generally very capable people. Hands down, those people stayed. They'll be trading 7 figures right
100%,
now.
man.
That's just the truth. That's just the reality. Because people have scaled up that weren't even close to their level, and they've already scaled up.
And we literally saw that at the event yesterday.
So that's living proof and truth then. But one of the big things, I remember this conversation, it was like, and I want to ask you a question first. What was the 7th trade, your last 7 trades? Can you remember every single one of them?
Yeah. I'm joking. I can't remember.
I was like, really? Good for you.
Yeah,
I was like,
sick. Right? Because as you become more experienced, you lose attachment for trades. You just don't remember. Like, there's trades that I can't remember, not the exact order, unless it was like literally the last trade that I took. Now, at this
I hope
time,
you remember your last trade, otherwise it's a different problem.
So this trade that I took, right? And I remember when
Is this the break-even one?
Yeah, I scammed someone.
I remember
the dollar
this.
card.
Yeah, I remember this. That's
but this
so
was
funny.
someone who I generally knew. I've like actually met this person individually, spent time with them, actually helped them make money in one scenario, which is even more hilarious. But we won't go into that part of the story just yet. However, I don't recap this trade for like a whole month. And in that period of time, it's a very busy month. I've taken lots of trades. Right, and I'd moved the stop loss. So instead of like a 20 pip stop, so I still can't remember it because it was just a break even. It was just a quick in and out. I literally cannot remember it. And I was recapping the position, but the risk reward had moved, and I'd locked it incorrectly by accident. And because it wasn't that important there or thereabouts, like on your actual broker,
you didn't realize
it was a case of a few pips. Like the idea of it didn't change the structure of the trade. The idea of the trade, it was actually nothing. And then that was his thing. He was like, "Yeah, man, listen." When someone doesn't want to take ownership of like where they are, if they can find a reason to think, I'm not successful because it's not legit.
Yeah.
They're like, yes.
But
And
I
they-
remember
they
this
want to
all-
give in to that.
Yeah. I was still on the outside for this one. I remember it too, right? And I was like, again, I'm willing for Mark and Falcon to be a scam, right?
Yeah.
And I was like being told this thing. I was like, all right, great. I'm ready to bounce. Like, tell me, right? And then they're like, yeah, you scammed the break even. And I was like, what does that do? I was like, yeah. What's the angle though?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, what's he do? Like, like if you put in, like, if that trade turned into a 17% trade, I'm like, okay, yeah,
Of
that's
course.
sketchy. Like,
Yeah.
you said you made 1, now it's 17. That's a red flag. I was like,
A lot of things are
he
sketchy
sh- I
nowadays,
was like,
isn't it,
man?
he-
Yeah,
I was like,
exactly.
he showed, he showed a break even. I was like, I was like, yes.
But do you know what? And when you try and defend that, right, and you try and go against that, people say, "Oh, look, you're triggered, right? Why are you getting so salty for?" But it's like they've got no morals. Like people don't defend nothing nowadays. Like, and that's why they are where they are.
People distance themselves to quit later.
Yeah.
That's
100%.
always been true. And the commonality with these type of people, any student that I've ever coached, mentored, whatever it is, they will find ways. They'll decide in their mind. It's not always conscious to them. So there's not always this like deep maliciousness of like, I need to prove that this is a scam for me to leave. They just find reasons to exit. And it's in their own head, in their own insecurities. And the reality is, time is a beautiful thing because now time is part, especially for the event, it's phenomenal. What's the difference? People have the same resources, same tennis racket, same ball. Why can they make it work? But people can stand next to a student with the same dashboard, same resources and go, no, I don't believe it. But he's right next to you.
It's funny. It's just sorry, real quick,
go.
right? Because funny enough, in a lot of these things, I would consider myself a logical person. I don't know if you can just say that, but like I do, right? And a lot
I
of
do
times
as
Very logical.
is no, but it's like I'll just look at what's obvious. That to me, that's all you really have to do a lot of the times. And funny enough, like when I switched strategies, and this is a big important part, I was already consistent on the previous one. And I'm not saying like my free strategy works. Like I will still attest to that today. I've never been like, oh no, this doesn't. No, support resistance EMA. Honestly, it still works. There's phenomenal entries. It does all that, right? Why I switched at the time was there was a particular part that I didn't understand. So it was with like horizontals. I didn't understand like a really great horizontal line. I don't know why. It just never clicked with me. They were like, oh, this one's really good. I was like, okay, great. Like why, right? And it's like has 86 touches. And I was like, great.
Yeah.
What if it has 84? How much worse is that, right? And that was the side of me that wanted to turn it a bit more mechanical. Now, don't get me wrong. I agree with you about the discretion side of things. And that to me is the sustainability in it. Because I knew if you're playing something fully mechanical, like when you look at those algos, they have to be edited, like in terms of like ones that like JP Morgan run and stuff, right? Because at some point, it's like playing poker with your like cards face up. You can beat me for a few rounds when I see your cards because you just have a good hand. But over a large enough sample size, if I know what you're going to do, it's like, I'll be able to beat you. And that's like the ASR side of things where the overall side of like not necessarily market structure, but like these strategies are based on things like that. The same message works, but the entry, the whatever, that's what gets adjusted, not maybe year on year, but over time. And there are different ways to enter it, right? So it was interesting to look at that. And I was like, well, I got really good at this thing. And then I like found a way to improve it, so to speak. Whereas what I found with a lot of people, it's like they weren't necessarily good. But they told themselves they were. No proof of such. Like for themselves, I don't need the proof. I'm like, just you to you, right? If you knew this, you would have some sort of concrete proof, So for myself, I was like, look, well, I am positive every month on a decent sample size. Like I think at the time I was taking like 12 trades a month.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, every month is ending +3, +4, plus whatever. I was like, okay, I can mathematically say I am consistent.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot that I could do to do better. But it really did show that point of when I would look at what people would say and what they would do, there was no congruency. And there wasn't any degrees of proof to it for themselves.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing when students left, so to speak. I was like, again, like, is this just you feeling better about, because it is hard to back yourself. I get that. Like for a very long period of time, it gets scary. And it's like, in a way you get FOMO because everyone's like, when you look at social media in general, people are living their best lives. Like that was a joke for a while. I was like, #living my best life.
Yeah.
Right. But it gets to you. He's living his best life. He's living his best life. Why am I not living my best life? So you end up falling into those traps, and it's quite unfortunate, honestly.
And that's why documenting your journey is, because like I said, the time that I came from, I never heard of community. I never heard of like documenting your own journey.
Community didn't exist.
It did not exist before. And I can attest to that because when I taught myself at 18 months, almost 2 years, I'd seen every course out there almost, or every infrastructure, and I've not come across a trading community before. Maybe I might missed one, but I've not seen one, right? Other than Falcon itself. So when I joined, I saw this whole like new theme of like categorizing your journey and stuff. And the reason why I've seen everybody who's at the loudmouth, it's always the loudmouth that they sabotage in the end. Because if you're documenting something, it means you're not at that level yet, right? So you're documenting your way there. If you do it for the public, half of which don't care about you, you could get run over by a bus tomorrow. They couldn't care. And that's the problem. Like as a public figure, as an influencer, you'll think, well, these people care about me. I'm doing everything for my subscribers or my YouTube commenters or Instagram.
So sad.
It's so sad. And people that don't have an actual circle because they're relying so much on random people that they don't know. You know, Joe Smith 123. Why would they think someone like that would care for them so much? And it's funny how people like that, if you fail or you go, down a dangerous road or you just mess something up, they'll turn their back on you straight away. And people realize that the hard way. But like I said, documenting a journey, you're going to make natural mistakes. And even if you tell people, look, I'm not here to coach you, I'm not here to do this, I'm a nice guy, I'm perfect, right? People are still going to get influenced by what you say. And you can damage so many people. It's like premature mentoring without actually claiming yourself to be a mentor. And people do that. Like, oh yeah, I'm just trying to find myself and all these things. They just find themselves losing. That's where they find themselves again and again and again. And they go on about the same things. Yeah, you got to back test more, do this and do that and blah, blah, blah. And they'll say the same things. And this is the problem, again, with documenting, like going back to my point. When you've not changed a message, because look, if I've got 2 years of experience and I've started documenting my journey for people, right? I'm saying a certain message, which in that time, my perception seems right. A year later, I might have gone through some experiences where I'm like, that's wrong. But I've just told so many hundreds of thousands of people that that's who I am.
So reckless.
And now if I go against that, what does that say about me?
Well, that's it. It's like, I don't even blame them for vlogging. I actually think it starts off like kind of innocent in that way. You're just like being genuine, right? But then the perception of who you need to be also creeps in. So it's the same thing. You can like, I don't know, fail an FTMO and you're like, hey guys, I failed it. And everyone's like, it's all right, man, it happens.
Yeah.
But if you fail it 3, 4, or 5 times, there's a part of you says, I'm not going to make a video about this. And people are expecting now payouts, they just want to see the thing. Funny enough, because you remind me of a very good point. And before, I remember this as well, right? It's the same thing, kind of like breaking down the logic, so to speak. You look up, I remember at the time, I don't know why, I looked up FXCM, right? And the reviews were horrible. Like every broker has for some, like they're pretty bad reviews across the board. And you read it and they're like, yeah, they stop hunt, they do this, they do that, right? And I was like, yeah, facts. And I wanted to, until I realized, I was like, wait, how do I know this person is credible? Like, how do I not know this person who just said FXCM scammed him is a shit trader?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then I realized, I was like, wait, anyone who's actually like making money, I just like visualized for myself. I was like, okay, if I was trading large cap right now and I was making money, am I going to like trust pilot FXCM? I was like, who's done nothing to my journey? Like, they're just an execution platform. Like, that's all they are, right? They didn't call me up and be like, hey, man, dollar cat's looking nice tonight, huh?
Yeah.
Like, they did nothing. I was like, no, I probably just make my money and move on, right? I was like, maybe if they didn't process the withdrawal, yes, I would leave like a negative review in that case. But in terms of like a stop hunt or whatever, if it just happened once, chances are it wasn't FXCM. If it was happening constantly, like every single, I'd be like, okay, great. And you see that on like the really sketchy brokers. But FXCM in Canada, it's regulated. You're insured up to $1 million on the CIPF, I think it's called. So it's like, I was like, everything is there if they become insolvent, if they do whatever. Fast forward to the same thing, right? You look at like trading companies, you look up the reviews. I remember there's this one really big one against Falcon, right? And I was already competent at this point. And they're like, yeah, this is what Falcon would take. I was like, absolutely not. I was like, I've never, and I wasn't even part of the team, right?
Yeah.
And you're reading the comments, and it was less to do with the first person. It's more to do with the comments where people are like, thank you so much, like for protecting us, right? And that's the part where I would say these YouTubers also at the same time, where it's a bit unfortunate, is you can come off and say like, it's the whole no offense thing. I don't know if you guys remember, like back in early 2000s, I'd be like, Ibby, you're an idiot. No offense. Though. And it's like, you can't be offended now. I just said no offense, right? And it's that whole like, you don't have to take my word for it, but then you still say it.
And then give advice.
And
use the words advice.
It's like giving an insult with the disguise of a compliment.
Literally though, right? And it's the same thing. And it's like, and that's the part where it's like, given that credibility, and you notice it with pessimism, don't get me wrong. Pessimism in itself, when someone's being safe in that way, it is more protective, it's defensive, it's seen as mature, right? Like if I were to say, hey, the world's gonna collapse tomorrow, everyone would listen. If I said a bull run's gonna happen, you're happy, but you don't really care to hear why, because it's like, whatever, it's good times. But if I'm like, the world's gonna collapse, it's kind of like Michael Burry in that way. How many shorts has he called since the great financial crisis, right? For 2020, and like, we're all expecting a recession at some point, but it's like, if you're calling it like right now, it's very different, and I'm not taking shots at the guy. I'm just saying like there's a degree of, you see it over and over from 2020 and stuff. So that same logic kind of comes in and you realize, and as you were saying with the pre-mentoring, that to me was another thing, right? Like, how long have you been doing something before you actually start teaching it to someone?
And you can tell that, right? Because anybody can go back and look at Falcon's post, my posts, Abdu's, yours. The message has actually never changed. I can say that confidently. And you know how I know people are so lost? Is because they're following like a lagging indicator everything that we're saying. Nowadays, people are going, yes, psychology is amazing. You got to focus on this. Your mind is so important. But everyone's following what we set in the first
Yeah,
place.
self-image is the new talk of the town now.
I know.
I wonder where that came from.
I know. You set a trend people will follow, and people are so gullible, and it's sad to see adults that are like children in the bodies of adults, right? And it's sad to see that the industry's come to that, because trading, I don't tell people I'm a Forex trader, first of all, right? I make up something that sounds nicer.
Finance,
yeah. I'm a finance guy, right?
You're a postman.
But the thing is, they've given the name such a tarnished, given the industry such a tarnished name, because there's no professionalism left anymore at all. And that's again what I wanted to lead to you, right? Is like, we were speaking about this at the event yesterday, how with the roadmap for 2023, right? We want to bring back that professionalism to a degree. Is there points, because I don't want to say too many things from yesterday, but what have you got on that?
So the infrastructure you saw 2023 is literally ridiculous. And this is why time is a beautiful thing. And when you look at what's happened over the landscape of this space, even people that I've mentored, I'm always still shocked as to how people cannot make logical decisions from people that we've had, that students have actually done reasonably well with our strategy, come on a podcast 2 weeks later, then throw shade to us. So they admit to the public that they're a scammer and they lied, and then people follow them. I'm still confused how people can't make that connection. But it goes back to the same thing. We're in a world where everyone loves negativity. The pessimism side, they love it. As soon as they hear it, they're like, yep, another reason for me to justify why I'm not succeeding and haven't taken ownership. Yet there's other people that have done it. So when I look at the roadmap and I see the students in there of what they've got in front of them, I look around the room and see there was people there that could have got sucked into that bullshit, but they didn't.
Yeah.
Right, Sahat, for example. I've mentioned him a lot because he was one at the meetup in London that actually came forward and said, right, I want to be a full-time trader. He could have surrounded himself with morons and thought, oh, he went through friction. He probably would have had reasons to not push through. So it's not working for me. Been doing this for a couple of years. I'm not making money yet. But why did he push through? So you just start to realize there's certain types of mentalities that eventually break through. So when we build the roadmap, of course, got the 7-figure club. That's going to be absolutely incredible. It's the type of infrastructure that doesn't get built easily. So it's taken me years to build it. Even things like testing. We was having this conversation previously, and a lot of students have said to me yesterday, which I didn't even know that they realized. They said, you know what I love about Falcon is that you could have had reasons to launch the addition to the strategy like a year before, and it probably would have hyped a lot of people up, but you didn't compromise your values and you tested it further because you actually give a shit about us. And some people don't even acknowledge things like that. They're just like, yep, strategy, this, that. They don't realize what goes into it.
No, honestly, because you remind me of a very big point, and especially because I realized that yesterday. It's the degree of expectations, right? And I say this, when I came into trading at the time, and I understood trading and its potential, I was like, how much would it cost me, like in tuition, to become a millionaire, right? And make millions from the market for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So I was like, all right, let's think about this. Funny enough, let's go about logically. I was like, well, Harvard, arguably the best school in the world or whatever. Tuition's about $100K a year or whatever, scholarships, whatever. But call it just a few $100,000, right? So $300K for your full Harvard scholarship. And then let's say you'll be a lawyer at a top firm. You have to work like 16 hours a day. You're the first in, last to leave. You got to do it for years, burnout, all those things to then make, to be a Harvey Specter, make $1,000 an hour. So I was like, okay, coming into trading, I was like, I have to spend at least, I don't know, voice crack, my bad. That was from yesterday.
you nearly went Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, you don't know. I was like, at least $100,000. That, no joke. That was the thing. And then I was like, all right. And if it's not that, I probably have to put in a lot of hours. And funny enough, you hear it in like not just trading. They were saying every industry tells you to be a master, you do like 10,000 hours. That was like across every industry you see. You just hear that one. I was like, okay, let me just assume this one's fact. So I need to spend 10,000 hours in trading. So I was like, all right, well, I did some math, right? Funny enough, I was like, well, if I do 4 hours a day, because that seemed more sustainable. I was like, how long would it take me? And I was like, maybe I could do a bit more here, there, the weekends 8, that one, this. Because I started engineering and all that at the time, and my grandfather. I was like, I got to get to 10,000 hours. I never once came in and I was like, yeah, in a year or two, I'm going to do it. Yeah. And that's where I think I realized when I was going through like losses and stuff, I didn't doubt the other things. I was like, I haven't spent enough time, and that was the kind of big perspective. As I see people, they come in and it's like on something like 97 pounds. I was like, dude, this is like so free because remember, I'm coming in with 100,000 as an expectation, and like, I didn't have the money, but I was like, if you're going to make millions, I was like, well, you'll take a bank loan, you'll find it, you'll work an extra job, you'll do what it is. And you'll do this for 5-10 years. And then you'll be financially free, which still beats the traditional method of retiring at 60, 65, right? Whereas I realize a lot of people, it's like, no, they don't want to realize they haven't been doing it long enough. They haven't put in enough hours. They haven't been specific with those hours, and that they're still young in that way, which is fine. It's not about that, but it's like, so then they'll just look for an alternative reason, because I get it. It's hard to say you're the problem, whereas thankfully, I'm sure you guys are the same in a lot of successful I've been, it's like, it was just so easy to blame yourself.
Of course.
I was like, yeah, no, I'm the shit one,
Yeah.
until I wasn't shit anymore,
So basically what you're saying is I could have charged you 100K.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You actually, no, genuinely, though, because it was like, it's risk to reward.
Of course.
Pay 100K, make millions for the rest of your life. Like,
Once you got the skill, no one can take it away from you.
100%.
Exactly.
And I think that's what's incredibly exciting about next year for going back to the roadmap before we finish up, just to have the infrastructure that we've built. They've seen everything they've got in front of them. Every possible resource you could imagine, the support of the community is next level. And it's taken years to get to that stage, because like before, it was a bit more of I wouldn't say wishful thought, but no one of us can predict how long it's going to take someone to persist until they break through.
Mm-hmm.
But to see, I knew this would be a breakthrough year, and it's happened in the hundreds. It's ridiculous. So that compound effect, when things actually start to move, people don't realize how quickly everything else then just accelerates. So if we think about 2023, it's going to be pretty crazy.
100%.
And I think next year is going to be lots of changes in the industry as well. Things are going to shift. Of course, there are a few. There's a couple of genuine people out there. I mean, of course, we had Risen Albi yesterday who came to the event. Genuine guys. I think there are some genuine people out there in the industry, but unfortunately, there's going to be a lot that drop like flies, because if you build something on quicksand, eventually it starts to sink. And what we've had is that years of building. I just stayed quiet. I just got on with it. I listened to the bullshit comments. Like, these people are clueless, haven't got a clue what they're doing, don't understand the infrastructure. They're not international. Not like international player over here. But they don't understand how to build these things in layers over time so something's robust.
Yeah.
So I've just got on with it in the background, build it stage by stage, and now we have something that can change people's lives forever and beyond that.
Yeah.
And that's the powerful thing about it.
100%.
So I'm looking forward to it. Any last and final words, what you're looking forward to for 2023?
Well, it's going to be the biggest financial year for everybody. Anybody's focused anyway, right? Like I say to a lot of the coaching students that are like progressing now, I'm like, you're going to hit $1 million in the next year. And I get into their head and like, do you think? I'm like, I don't think I know.
Exactly.
Right? Because statistically, there's no way they can't. On most firms, what is 50 to 70% that you got to hit? I'm like, you can make that in a quarter if you're focused right. So I literally don't doubt openly that there's going to be at least minimum 5 millionaires next year. Minimum. Like worst case scenario, nothing goes to plan, there's 5 millionaires next year. I think we'll be the first trading community ever to cultivate legit 7-figure traders
and sustain them as well.
Sustainability, exactly.
It's different, just like spiking to almost like a wick.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
And then the wick closes down
there.
here. It's like, right, I'm back at 100 again. And that's such a great point, because we're going to have hundreds of 6-figure traders. We already have 6-figure traders.
Yeah.
And some, of course, there's people in the shadows that are at that point. But I know there's going to be people that literally start off the year breaking through to 100, end the year on, let's say, 700.
Yeah.
Even if you're not at 7 figures, you're still saving.
Phenomenal life,
Your life has changed. You've taken care of your family. You do what you want. You can live a phenomenal lifestyle.
And the best part about that is, like I've always believed this, that a student is only as good as his mentor is, right? Like, because you've already done it and you've allocated your money into assets and you've scored your capital. Think about when they get to that stage, they're gonna already have that done for them. If they had an inadequate mentor, for example, they would get to that stage. Ironically, I don't know how, but if they did, that'd be the worst thing for them. Where are they going to put their money? They would give it back just as quick. And that's so scary to me.
That's what people don't think about. They're chasing a strategy, not thinking about who are you listening to.
Infrastructure.
Like, what are you absorbing? Like, who's your mentor?
Yeah.
Like, what do they stand for? Do you actually want to be like them? Like, what have they got going for them? And if they don't know what to do with money after, someone who, let's say it was a really skilled trader, but it was like a high on coke all the time, terrible role model, but was just a good trader and taught you how to trade and you made money, then what?
I mean, if you look at just the most recent example of FTX, right? 16 billion to zero in 24 hours or 36.
If that doesn't show you,
like,
I don't
no
know
one's
what
too
else
big to
will.
fail, right? Like, when you look at it, honestly, if you had asked me, can you lose 16 billion? I'm going to tell you no, honestly. Like, funny enough, that would actually go against my own logic and beliefs, because I'm like, no one's going to lose 16 billion. Like, how do you do that?
Because you couldn't get to that stage.
Yeah, I was like, there's no way you built all that, know, and that's a conversation for a different day. But I was like, dude, that shows that literally no one's too big to fail. You can make it to $16 billion and lose it all in a day.
That's insane.
That's
why you tell me you can't lose 50K.
You need the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Quick run, 2023. What are you most excited
Honestly,
about?
similar answer. I see it as the year of withdrawals. You know, like that's what I was saying. It was no, it's
The
like it's
year
literally
scale, year of withdrawals.
Yeah.
It's
No,
true.
but it's because like as I said, this was my first in-person event, and it was real. You know, people are trading from the guy. It wasn't like, hey Abdu, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna work hard. It's like, no, I've worked hard. I've got the capital, you know, okay, fine. Give them a bit to get adjusted to it, because I think that's the part also people kind of forget of, like, oh, I have like 500K funding now. And I'm like, yeah, like, okay, take 2 seconds though, like acknowledge it and like live with it a bit, right? Because if it's the first time you're gonna get a withdrawal, it's euphoric, it's scary, it's everything, right? But it's like the people that have now been having it, and you're gonna see more and more of them. You're gonna see the first withdrawal into the next, where it just becomes a very frequent thing, you know. And then how that money is gonna go into other things, and we'll like be able to the virtual trading floor, which I'm actually really looking forward to, you know, because I'm a huge guy when it comes to like data analytics. I just love looking into
how
that.
we're gonna hedge it. How we're gonna make, it's.
I'm super
yeah,
excited
yeah.
for that personally, like from a pure statistical point of view, so to speak. But
Yeah.
from a student teacher perspective, it's like, it's just there's nothing beating watching people that you've been putting your heart and soul succeed. I can't say anything more than that, honestly.
100%. Well, thank you so much for coming to the event. You both smashed it yesterday, by the way. Honestly, it was incredible, everything we went over. So, yeah,
I didn't
looking
kill it.
forward to
You did
can
kill
take
it,
all
man.
the
Thank
credit.
you, good. Yeah. He's like, thanks. He looks
But of course, it was a pleasure to have you, Abdu. First time in us three as coaches. Honestly, it was incredible.
Yeah.
But I really think we're going to take that moment into 2023. I could just feel it was something different, making it now at a high level, and that's just going to accelerate. Guys and girls, really hope you enjoyed this podcast, kind of a round chit chat table and a recap of yesterday, which was phenomenal. Thank you so much for tuning in. If there's anything that you resonated with in particular, where you are in your journey, whether you've blown accounts or you've fallen into these traps, feel free to reach out, drop a detailed comment. We'd absolutely love to know. But if you're in the trading space and you've got enough courage to go after it in the first place, I honestly, regardless of what system you trade, I commend you, because it's a difficult game, but that's why the rewards are so tremendous.